The $20 bill trembled in Jim Sullivan's calloused fingers, rain-soaked and desperate at the downtown Seattle bus stop. His son's empty inhaler prescription burned in his jacket pocket, the last barrier between Tommy's next asthma attack and tragedy. A shivering woman in designer clothes materialized through the downpour, no coat, arms wrapped around herself like broken wings. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in his world of want and hunger. The construction foreman's jacket, threadbare, patched, his last vestige of dignity, hung heavy on his shoulders. Every rational thought screamed survival, self-preservation, the cruel mathematics of poverty. But Sarah's voice whispered from the grave, "We always have enough to help." His weathered hands moved without permission, shrugging off warmth he couldn't afford to lose. The woman's eyes widened in shock as expensive fabric met working-class kindness. "You'll freeze," she protested, but Jim draped the jacket around her trembling frame anyway. Neither knew this moment would trigger a conspiracy that would topple a billion-dollar empire and prove that sometimes the poorest person carries the richest heart. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 2 years ago, James Sullivan commanded construction crews across Seattle's skyline, his calloused hands building the city's dreams one steel beam at a time. His wife, Sarah, would pack him lunch in a red cooler, kiss him goodbye at dawn, and promise dinner would be waiting when he returned home to their modest Ballard house, where 9-year-old Tommy practiced piano and filled sketch pads with crayon drawings of skyscrapers. Cancer arrived like a thief in the night, stealing Sarah's laughter first, then her strength, finally her breath on a cold February morning that shattered Jim's world into irreparable pieces. The medical bills devoured their savings like wildfire, $180,000 for treatments that bought them 9 precious months together. The house went next, then Jim's tools, pawned piece by piece to keep Tommy fed and warm, while grief paralyzed his ability to work. The construction industry that had sustained him for 20 years turned its back with brutal efficiency. Younger men, cheaper labor, companies that couldn't afford compassion in an unforgiving economy. Jim's certification expired when he couldn't afford renewal fees. His reputation crumbled under the weight of missed deadlines and tear-stained blueprints. The hardest conversation of his life happened on a playground swing set, Tommy's small hands gripping the chains while Jim explained why Grandma Maggie would take care of him for a while. "Just until Daddy gets back on his feet," he promised, watching his son's world collapse in real time. Tommy nodded with the heartbreaking maturity of children forced to grow up too fast, tucking his favorite drawing, "Me and Dad Building the World," into Jim's jacket pocket like a talisman against despair. 38 floors above the chaos, Catherine Montgomery reigned over her technology empire from a glass tower that scraped Seattle's cloudy sky. Infinity Technologies had revolutionized cloud computing, transforming her from foster care survivor to Forbes's youngest self-made female billionaire. Her penthouse apartment overlooked Elliott Bay through floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most people's annual salaries, but the view felt more like a prison than paradise. Success tasted like ashes when consumed alone. Kate hadn't taken a vacation in 8 years. Hadn't been on a date in 3, hadn't cried since her mentor's funeral left her truly orphaned in a world that measured worth in quarterly earnings. Every morning brought another board meeting, another acquisition, another step up a ladder that seemed to stretch infinitely toward nowhere. Her Tesla had broken down tonight, a cruel irony that forced Seattle's most powerful woman onto public transportation for the first time in a decade. The rain soaked through her Armani blazer as she waited at the bus stop, shivering not just from cold but from the strange vulnerability of being ordinary, invisible, just another face in the crowd she'd spent her life rising above. Neither Jim nor Kate could have predicted that this moment, poverty meeting privilege at a rain-soaked bus stop, would ignite a chain of events that would expose corporate corruption, challenge everything they believed about worth and dignity, and prove that sometimes the universe conspires to heal two broken hearts through one impossible act of kindness. The downtown Seattle bus crawled through traffic 23 minutes behind schedule, its headlights cutting through October rain that turned sidewalks into mirrors, reflecting neon promises. Jim Sullivan stamped his feet in boots, held together by duct tape and determination, checking his cracked phone screen for the fourth time. Tommy's inhaler had wheezed empty yesterday morning, leaving his son vulnerable to the autumn air that turned every breath into a battle. Maggie's Social Security check stretched like taffy across necessities, never quite covering the $47 that separated Tommy from his next full breath. The $20 bill in Jim's pocket represented 3 days of skipped meals, but mathematics meant nothing when your child's lungs were closing. Kate Montgomery emerged from the Starbucks across Pine Street like an apparition, phone pressed against her ear while rain transformed her tailored blazer into a second skin. Her Louboutin heels clicked against wet concrete as she ducked under the bus stop shelter, briefcase clutched like armor against the cold. "The Tesla won't start until Friday," she explained to her assistant, voice tight with unfamiliar helplessness. "Yes, I realize it's absurd that I don't know how to navigate public transit." Jim watched her shoulders shake with bone-deep cold, recognizing the particular misery that comes when expensive fabric meets Seattle's merciless weather. His construction jacket, brown Carhartt worn soft by 15 seasons, frayed cuffs telling stories of honest work, hung heavy with responsibility and warmth he couldn't afford to lose. Every survival instinct screamed protection, self-preservation, the brutal arithmetic of poverty that demanded hoarding every scrap of comfort. But Sarah's voice echoed from their wedding day. "Jimmy, we don't have much, but we've got each other. And there's always enough to help." Without conscious decision, Jim's weathered hands moved to his jacket zipper. The cold hit like a physical blow, but he stepped forward anyway, crossing an invisible line that separated strangers from saints. "Miss?" His voice carried the rough kindness of a man who'd lost everything except his humanity. "You look like you could use this more than me." Kate stared, genuinely shocked. In Seattle's tech kingdom, where everything carried a price tag, nobody gave away anything for free. "I can't take your coat," she whispered. "You'll freeze." Jim smiled with tired grace, gently draping warmth around her trembling shoulders. "Already am. Besides, the bus should be here soon." Kate Montgomery woke in her Capitol Hill penthouse at 5:47 a.m., the stranger's jacket draped over her Italian leather chair like a question mark demanding answers. Dawn light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the threadbare fabric that looked even more impossible in her sterile sanctuary of success. She should return it immediately, of course, find the man, thank him properly, close this chapter of inexplicable kindness. But when her manicured fingers explored the jacket's worn pockets for identification, they discovered something that stopped her breathing entirely. A child's drawing, folded with the careful precision of treasure, creased soft from countless handling. 2 stick figures stood beneath a crooked rainbow, one tall, one small, holding hands under a construction crane drawn in bold strokes. Green crayon letters spelled out a message that shattered Kate's carefully constructed walls. "Me and Dad building the world. I love you, Daddy. Tommy." The paper trembled in her hands as memories of her own childhood crashed through her defenses. Foster homes where no one saved her artwork, where love came with conditions and expiration dates, where she learned that survival meant building walls higher than anyone could climb. This drawing represented everything she'd never had. Unconditional love, a father who carried his child's hopes like sacred scripture. Kate reached for her secure phone with hands that hadn't shaken since her first board presentation. "Marcus, I need you to find someone." A man, approximately 40 years old, construction background. He was at the Pine and Fourth bus stop last night around 9 p.m. Her head of security's voice carried professional skepticism. "Ma'am, that's not much information to work with. Seattle's a big city." "Find him." Kate's voice carried the steel that had built her empire from nothing. "Use traffic cameras, facial recognition, whatever resources necessary." Cost is irrelevant. Within 36 hours, she possessed answers that painted a devastating picture. James Sullivan, 42, former construction foreman whose company collapsed under medical debt. Wife deceased from cancer, son living with grandmother due to father's inability to provide stable housing. No permanent address, last seen accepting day labor at various construction sites across King County. The security footage from the coffee shop across the street captured the moment with brutal clarity. A man with nothing choosing to give everything to a stranger who couldn't even see his face clearly through the rain. Kate studied each frame obsessively. The way Jim's shoulders squared before making his choice, the gentle reverence with which he placed the jacket, the smile that somehow reached across the digital divide to touch her heart. She'd built a career on calculated risks, knowing precisely when to invest and when to walk away. This felt different, like destiny wearing work boots and carrying a kind heart that had survived more loss than her billions could ever heal. Kate found Jim Sullivan at Molly's Diner on Friday morning, a grease-stained institution where coffee cost 99 cents and nobody asked uncomfortable questions about circumstances or credentials. He hunched over the Seattle Times classified section like a scholar studying ancient texts, nursing black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. When she approached his corner booth wearing designer jeans and his brown Carhartt jacket, conversation stopped mid-sentence throughout the restaurant. "Mind if I sit?" Kate asked, sliding into the cracked vinyl seat before he could protest. Jim looked up slowly, recognition dawning across features weathered by loss and sleepless nights. "You're the lady from the bus stop. You kept my jacket." "I'd like to return it," Kate lied smoothly. "But first, I have a proposition that might change both our lives." What followed was the most surreal conversation in Jim's 42 years of existence. Kate explained she was CEO of Infinity Technologies, that she was launching an unprecedented initiative called Real-World Integration. She needed someone who understood regular people, who could help her trillion-dollar company reconnect with the humanity it had lost somewhere between IPOs and quarterly earnings reports. "I don't have a college degree," Jim said quietly, staring at hands that bore the permanent stains of honest work. "Haven't worn a tie in 2 years, can't even afford to renew my construction license." "I have 3 degrees from Harvard and 15 custom ties hanging in my closet," Kate replied without hesitation. "They haven't taught me how to recognize genuine leadership when it's standing in the rain, giving away its last possession to help a stranger." "You demonstrated executive presence in 30 seconds that most MBA graduates never achieve in 30 years. The salary offer, $75,000 to start, with full benefits and housing assistance, hit Jim like a physical blow that left him gasping. It represented more than he'd made in his best construction years, enough to reclaim Tommy from temporary exile, enough to rebuild the life that cancer had demolished. "Why me?" he asked, voice thick with disbelief and desperate hope. "Because yesterday you proved that real wealth isn't about what you accumulate. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice for someone else's well-being." Monday morning arrived like a reckoning wrapped in corporate formality. Kate introduced Jim to the Infinity Technologies executive team as Director of Human Connection and Community Outreach, watching their faces cycle through skepticism, confusion, and barely concealed hostility. The conference room fell silent except for the aggressive clicking of Bobby Winchester's Mont Blanc pen against his legal pad. "We're hiring from homeless shelters now?" Bobby's voice dripped with the particular cruelty of privilege confronting poverty. What's our next innovation? A food truck in the lobby serving government cheese? Careful, Bobby. Kate's tone could have frozen Elliott Bay solid. The homeless man you're mocking just gave me a $50 million insight about authentic community engagement. What was your contribution to this quarter's innovation pipeline? Jim's first week felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. Employees whispered behind his back in elevators, their conversations dying when he approached. His second-hand suits from Goodwill didn't quite fit right. The sleeves too long, the shoulders too narrow. In meetings, he stumbled over corporate jargon that sounded like a foreign language designed to obscure rather than illuminate. But when Jim talked about people, really talked about what they needed, feared, hoped for, the room transformed. His breakthrough came during a product development session where the team was designing an application for optimizing urban resource allocation algorithms. "You mean helping poor folks find food banks?" Jim translated, his plain language cutting through the pretension like a blade. "Why not just say that? Why do we need $5 words for 2-cent problems?" The conference room fell silent. Then Kate began laughing, real laughter that echoed off glass walls like music. "Exactly. We're so busy optimizing our vocabulary that we've forgotten our actual purpose is serving human beings, not impressing other executives with our linguistic gymnastics." Bobby Winchester watched this exchange with growing alarm. He'd built his career on complexity, on making simple concepts sound sophisticated enough to justify his existence. Jim's directness threatened the entire ecosystem of corporate obfuscation that protected middle management from accountability. After the meeting, Bobby cornered Kate in her office. "This man is a liability. What happens when shareholders discover we've hired someone with his background? Bankruptcy, homelessness, questionable decision-making patterns?" "They'll see what I see," Kate responded coldly. "A man who lost everything to circumstances beyond his control and still retained enough character to help a stranger in need. That's the kind of leadership we should be modeling, not hiding." But Bobby's seeds of doubt took root in fertile soil. Board members began asking pointed questions about Kate's judgment. Stock analysts mentioned unusual executive appointments in their reports. The pressure mounted like steam in a kettle, threatening to explode into consequences none of them could control. The emergency board meeting blindsided Kate like a corporate execution disguised as routine business. She walked into Infinity's 38th floor boardroom expecting quarterly reviews and discovered a carefully orchestrated ambush. 12 board members sat around the mahogany table like a tribunal, Bobby Winchester positioned at the head wearing a prosecutor's smile that promised destruction. "Catherine," Chairman Morrison began with funeral formality, "we need to address your recent leadership decisions and their impact on shareholder confidence." Jim's background check spread across the polished table like evidence at a murder trial. Bankruptcy papers, eviction notices, the humiliating arrest photo from when police found him sleeping in his truck behind a warehouse. Every failure, every desperate moment, every scar from his fall from grace displayed for dissection by men who'd never missed a meal or chosen between medicine and rent. "This individual has access to classified corporate information," Bobby announced, his voice carrying manufactured concern. "Our competitors would pay millions for our cloud architecture specifications and proprietary algorithms. How can we guarantee he's not compromising our intellectual property for personal gain?" "Because I trust him completely," Kate responded, but her voice wavered like a cracking foundation. "Your trust isn't the issue here," Morrison continued with surgical precision. "It's your judgment that concerns us. The shareholders are questioning your emotional decision-making patterns. First, you authorized $2 million for community center renovations. Now you're recruiting directly from homeless populations. Where does this philanthropy experiment end?" The trap snapped shut with devastating efficiency. Bobby produced financial records showing Kate's charitable spending had increased 400% since Jim's hiring. Security footage of their dinner meetings. Photographs of Kate attending Tommy's school play, looking suspiciously like a woman whose professional boundaries had dissolved completely. She's emotionally compromised, Bobby concluded, with the satisfaction of a hunter delivering a killing blow. Personally involved with an employee who represents everything our institutional investors fear: instability, poor judgment, unquantifiable risk factors that threaten quarterly performance. The vote was scheduled for the following day at 6 p.m. Kate had 24 hours to prove Jim's value to the company or lose everything she'd built from nothing. That evening, Kate found Jim in his small office teaching a group of junior employees about authentic communication strategies. They clustered around his desk like disciples, laughing at his construction site anecdotes, taking notes as if he were dispensing wisdom from Mount Olympus instead of sharing stories about solving problems with duct tape and common sense. "Can I see you privately?" Kate's voice cut through their laughter like a blade. In her corner office, she spread Bobby's evidence across her desk with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a terminal diagnosis. She watched Jim's face crumble as he comprehended the scope of Winchester's investigation, the methodical way his life had been reduced to a series of failures and poor decisions. "Did you know?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "About my financial decisions?" About the charitable donations, the community programs? What? Jim's confusion appeared genuine, but doubt crept into Kate's heart like poison. "Kate, I don't understand what you're asking." "The community center renovation, the employee assistance fund, the expanded health care benefits, they're all initiatives you suggested during our conversations. Bobby believes you've been manipulating me, using my emotional attachment to influence corporate policy for your personal benefit." Jim stared at the documents as if they contained his death sentence, seeing his life reduced to a pattern of desperation and alleged exploitation. "Do you believe that's what I've been doing?" The question hung between them like a sword suspended by the thinnest thread. Kate looked at the man who'd given her his jacket, who brought Tommy to weekend office visits, who made her employees feel valued as human beings for the first time in years. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered, the words tasting like betrayal in her mouth. The boardroom at 6 p.m. resembled a corporate coliseum where careers went to die. 12 board members filled the leather chairs like judges at a tribunal, their faces carved from stone and quarterly profit margins. Key shareholders lined the walls, their presence transforming the space into a pressure cooker of institutional power and money. Kate sat at the defendant's table, while Jim insisted on attending despite her desperate protests, his presence feeling like a target painted on both their backs. Bobby Winchester rose like a prosecuting attorney delivering a closing argument, his presentation surgical in its precision and devastating in its implications. He displayed Jim's history like evidence of corporate malfeasance: the bankruptcy filings, the medical debt spiral, the trespassing arrest, the shelter stays. Each slide hammered another nail into Kate's professional coffin. Infinity Technologies succeeded by making calculated decisions based on empirical data, Bobby concluded, his voice carrying the weight of institutional wisdom. Ms. Montgomery's emotional involvement with Mr. Sullivan represents exactly the kind of sentimental weakness our competitors exploit. We cannot allow personal feelings to compromise fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. The silence that followed felt like a tomb. Then Kate stood, looking out at the faces that would decide her fate, and made the choice that would define her legacy. "You want empirical data?" Kate's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Jim's community outreach programs generated $15 million in new municipal contracts. His employee satisfaction initiatives reduced turnover by 40%, saving us $8 million in recruitment and training costs. His sentimental approach delivered the hardest numbers we've seen in 5 consecutive quarters. She paused, meeting each board member's eyes with unflinching determination. But you're absolutely right about one thing. I am emotionally involved in building a company that doesn't just extract profit from communities, but invests in human potential. If that vision doesn't align with Infinity's future, then you need a different CEO. The room fell silent, except for the distant hum of Seattle traffic 38 floors below. The choice crystallized with brutal clarity: Kate's humanitarian capitalism versus Bobby's traditional profit maximization. Success with soul versus revenue without responsibility. Chairman Morrison called for the vote. Hands rose like tombstones marking the death of idealism. The count was devastating. 8 votes against Kate, 4 in favor. After 15 years of building Infinity from a garage startup to a billion-dollar empire, Kate Montgomery was officially terminated as Chief Executive Officer. Bobby Winchester's smile could have powered the building. By morning, he would occupy the corner office that Kate had transformed into a symbol of possibility. The charity programs would be suspended immediately, the community partnerships dissolved, the employee assistance funds redirected toward more profitable initiatives. Kate cleared out her office like a war refugee, packing 15 years of her life into cardboard boxes. The view from the 38th floor, once her kingdom, now looked like a prison yard she'd finally escaped. Kate sat in her empty penthouse at 3 a.m., laptop balanced on her knees like a weapon of investigation, going through Infinity's financial records with the obsession of the damned. If she was going down, she needed to understand why. The numbers told a story that didn't make sense at first. Tiny discrepancies scattered through 18 months of corporate transactions, shell companies with impossible addresses, routing numbers that led to financial dead ends. Her secure phone buzzed. Detective Frank Morrison's name appeared on the screen like salvation wrapped in suspicion. "Miss Montgomery, I'm investigating financial irregularities at your former company. I'd like to discuss some concerning patterns we've discovered." "I'm not the CEO anymore, Detective. You should be talking to Bobby Winchester." Actually, Morrison's voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent 20 years unraveling corporate conspiracies. "I want to talk about Bobby Winchester." "We need to meet immediately." Morrison spread the evidence across Kate's dining room table like a puzzle missing crucial pieces. For 22 months, Bobby had been systematically siphoning funds through a sophisticated network of fake consulting firms and offshore shell companies. Small amounts initially, 50,000 here, 100,000 there, but the theft had accelerated dramatically after Jim's hiring. "We estimate he's stolen approximately $8 million, Morrison explained, pointing to highlighted transactions that painted a picture of methodical larceny. But here's what makes this interesting. The embezzlement jumped from 20,000 monthly to 200,000 monthly starting in October. Kate studied the timeline with growing horror and understanding. He was panicking. Jim's presence made him nervous about discovery. Or created the perfect opportunity, Morrison suggested grimly. What better cover for massive financial irregularities than a CEO making supposedly emotional spending decisions? Your charitable initiatives, the community programs, they provided ideal camouflage for his criminal operation. The truth hit Kate like a physical blow to her chest. Bobby hadn't just opposed Jim's hiring. He'd orchestrated the entire conspiracy to remove her and protect his elaborate theft scheme. Every board meeting, every whispered concern about her judgment, every carefully planted seed of doubt had been designed to create the chaos necessary for his embezzlement to continue undetected. "I need concrete evidence," Kate said, her voice carrying the steel that had built her empire. "I need someone on the inside," Morrison replied. "Someone Bobby trusts completely. Someone who can access his personal computer systems when security protocols are relaxed." Jim's phone rang at 8 p.m. while he was helping Tommy with homework in their soon-to-be foreclosed apartment, the eviction notice burning like acid in his jacket pocket. Kate's name on the caller ID felt like salt in a wound that refused to heal. "I know you probably hate me," Kate began, her voice thick with exhaustion and desperation. "I don't hate you," Jim said quietly, watching Tommy struggle with long division problems that seemed impossibly complex for a 9-year-old mind. "I'm grateful for what you gave us, even if it couldn't last. It doesn't have to end this way. Bobby Winchester has been stealing from the company for almost 2 years. Detective Morrison has a plan to expose him, but we need your help to gather the final evidence." Jim listened as Kate explained Morrison's strategy with growing disbelief. They needed someone to infiltrate Infinity during weekend hours when security was minimal, someone Bobby would never suspect of corporate espionage, someone who could access his personal computer files during his Saturday morning special projects sessions. "You're asking me to break into the building, Kate? I can't risk going back to jail. Tommy needs his father. Bobby Winchester destroyed both our lives to protect his criminal enterprise." Kate's voice carried a fury that transcended personal betrayal. "He used my feelings for you as cover for stealing $8 million from shareholders who trusted us. Help me prove that good people can still win, that kindness isn't weakness, that integrity matters more than quarterly profits." Jim looked at Tommy's drawing taped to their kitchen wall. "Me and Dad building the world," and realized that sometimes building the world meant tearing down the corrupt foundations that others had constructed. "Tell me exactly what you need me to do." Bobby Winchester's perp walk made the Seattle Morning News at exactly 6:47 a.m., his expensive suit wrinkled from a night in King County Jail, his empire of lies crumbling in real time beneath the weight of $8 million in documented theft. The same reporters who had crucified Kate and Jim now captured the real criminal in handcuffs, his carefully constructed facade dissolving under the harsh lights of television cameras and public scrutiny. Kate watched from her car outside Infinity Tower, seeing justice served but feeling strangely hollow. Vindication tasted like ash when everything you'd fought to build lay in ruins around your feet. The Seattle Times headline read, "Tech CFO arrested in massive embezzlement scheme, former CEO vindicated." But vindication couldn't restore the trust that had been shattered or heal the wounds that betrayal had carved into her soul. Chairman Morrison's voice carried the weight of institutional shame as he addressed the emergency board meeting called to address the crisis. "We owe Catherine Montgomery and James Sullivan profound apologies. Our rush to judgment, our willingness to believe the worst about two people of genuine character, nearly allowed a criminal to destroy everything this company represents." The vote to reinstate Kate as CEO was unanimous, accompanied by offers of increased salary, expanded authority, and whatever resources she needed to rebuild Infinity's damaged reputation. But when Morrison called to deliver the news, Kate's response surprised everyone in the boardroom. "I need time to consider your offer." Kate found Jim at Molly's diner that afternoon, sitting in the same booth where their unlikely partnership had begun weeks earlier. He was reading want ads again, but this time he looked up when she approached, his expression guarded but not hostile. "I heard about Bobby's arrest," he said simply. "Congratulations on being proven right." "The board wants me back." Kate slid into the worn vinyl seat across from him. "Full reinstatement, public apology, complete authority to run the company however I see fit." "That's incredible news. You deserve nothing less after what you've been through." Kate studied his face, seeing the careful walls he'd rebuilt around his heart, the protective distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before their world collapsed. "What do you deserve, Jim?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross first. heavy with implications and unspoken truths. "I learned something important during these past few days," Jim said finally, his voice gentle but firm. "About myself, about us, about what real partnership means. I can't be your charitable project, Kate. I can't be the poor man you rescued to prove you have a conscience. Is that honestly what you think this was between us? Wasn't it?" Jim's words carried no malice, only the quiet wisdom of someone who'd been forced to examine his own motivations and desires. "You gave me a job because I gave you a jacket. That's charity dressed up as opportunity, not genuine partnership between equals." Kate felt the truth of his observation like a blade between her ribs. "So, what happens now? Where does that leave us?" "We start over," Jim said without hesitation. "As equals who choose each other freely, not as people who need each other to fill some emotional void. If there's something real between us, it has to grow from mutual respect, not mutual rescue." Kate's first decision as reinstated CEO shocked the entire technology industry. She was taking a 6-month sabbatical to figure out who she wanted to be when she wasn't running a billion-dollar empire. The board initially resisted, but her threat to resign permanently convinced them to accept her terms. Jim used his FBI reward money, $500,000, for exposing Bobby's criminal conspiracy, to start Sullivan Construction Services. Not the empire he'd once dreamed of building, but something smaller and more meaningful. A company that specialized in community centers and affordable housing, that employed ex-felons and recovering addicts, that measured success in lives transformed rather than profits maximized. 3 months later, they met by accident at a different coffee shop, both ordering breakfast at 7 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday morning. Kate laughed when she spotted him across the crowded cafe. Jim grinned when he noticed her reading the same book about sustainable business practices. "How's the construction business treating you?" Kate asked, as they shared a small table by the window. "Slow but honest work," Jim replied, stirring sugar into his coffee. "How's unemployment suiting you?" "Terrifying, but liberating in ways I never expected." Kate sipped her latte thoughtfully. "I'm considering starting something completely new. Smaller scale, more human-centered. The kind of company that measures return on investment in hope rather than quarterly dividends." They talked for 3 hours, sharing dreams instead of desperations, planning futures instead of merely surviving present circumstances. When Jim finally stood to leave for a job site, Kate felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with business proposals or corporate strategies. "Jim, would you like to have dinner sometime? Not as former CEO and employee, not as savior and project, but simply as two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company." His smile could have powered downtown Seattle. "I'd like that very much, Kate. I'd like that more than anything." 6 months later, St. Mary's Community Center overflowed with an impossible mix of humanity. Tech executives sitting beside construction workers, former foster children laughing with billionaires, police detectives sharing stories with ex-inmates. Tommy Sullivan walked Kate down the aisle, wearing his father's old hard hat decorated with wildflowers, his 9-year-old face glowing with the joy of a boy who'd watched his broken family heal into something beautiful. Father O'Brien officiated with the radiance of a man who'd witnessed miracles firsthand, his Irish accent blessing their union with words that echoed off worn wooden walls. "Do you, Catherine, take James, not as a project or charity case, but as an equal partner in all of life's adventures?" "I do," Kate whispered, tears streaming down her face like rivers of gratitude. "Do you, James, take Catherine, not as a savior or benefactor, but as an equal partner in building something extraordinary together?" "I do," Jim's voice carried across the packed room like a promise kept. They exchanged simple silver bands, nothing fancy or expensive, But when Jim placed the ring on Kate's finger, she saw the inscription inside, "Pay it forward." Behind the altar hung that threadbare brown Carhartt jacket, now framed like a sacred relic, with a brass plaque reading, "Sometimes the smallest gift carries the greatest love." The community center had become their wedding venue because it represented everything they'd learned, that real wealth isn't measured in stock portfolios, but in the courage to give when you have nothing left, and the wisdom to receive love when your heart has forgotten how to trust. As Tommy danced with his new stepmother while Jim watched from the sidelines, the truth crystallized with perfect clarity. Sometimes the best construction project isn't building skyscrapers. It's building a family, one moment of unconditional love at a time. Dear friends, this story reminds us that our greatest moments often come not from what we achieve, but from what we're willing to give away. At 55, 60, or 68, we've learned that kindness never expires, that second chances can bloom at any age, and that the connections we make matter more than the wealth we accumulate. Jim's worn jacket became a symbol of hope because he chose compassion over self-preservation. Have you ever given something away that seemed small but changed everything? What act of unexpected kindness do you remember most from your own life? Share your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that it's never too late to be the person who makes someone else believe in goodness again.